Welcome, Rune Weavers. I know I said I was going to be doing the Runic Cosmology videos throughout January, but unfortunately, I caught a really bad cold that may or may not have been the flu. And so, to spare you all the sound of me sneezing and coughing through the Loki and Jotunn videos, I waited to upload them until this weekend. And so there will be these two videos coming up today, this evening. And then it may take me about another week to get the Germanic gods video. So that'll be coming early in February. And so then by mid February, we should be returning to working our way through the Elder Futhark. As we all know, life happens, right? And we just got to roll with it when it does. So, with that said, let's talk about the Jotunn. Who were the Jotunn? Well, the answer takes us back to the very beginning. If you remember in our first Runic Cosmology video talking about the origin of the world, we had Audhumla, the first cow, and Ymir, the first living being. Ymir is the father of all the Jotun, the gods of Asgard, and the Loki and his children. So, well, think about this for a moment, right? The word Jotun is usually translated in English as frost giant. And certainly these characters loom as large as giants in the stories, and some, like Utgard Loki / Skrimnir, are definitely enormous in proportions. But are the Asgardians really as separate from the Jotun as the stories would have us believe? After all, Odin, Vili, and Ve's parents were Bors and Bestla, two Jotun, and when we meet Tyr's parents in the sagas, they are also Jotun. And even in the next generation, such as Thor, you could call him half Jotun through his mother Jord, but his father, the Asgardian Odin, is also fully Jotun. This is part of why the good evil binary concepts, which were imported into the Norse pantheon from Christianity, don't work. Not once you crack the surface ice and look at the currents beneath. The more accurate binary, I've always heard, and I believe this too, is between order and chaos, not good and evil. The Jotun are not automatically evil simply because they are Jotun. Sometimes they can be good, and sometimes they can be a little bit of both. Many beings which embodied chaos, like the Jotun, up to including Loki, were treated as evil in Snorri, but it's not that black and white. The Jotun are wild, often dangerous, often magical, often very associated with cold and natural forces. But aside from the occasional act of villainy, they're not evil. Not in any way that we would understand it. In this first video on the Jotun, we'll meet a few of the Jotun characters who play a major role in some of the old stories, and some of my favorites, like Jord. The video after this one, Loki and his/her children, will really delve into the order-chaos divide as we examine Loki and their kids, who fall on different parts of that spectrum. But let us begin then with Loki's Jotun lover, maybe bride, Angrboda. For all the importance Angrboda has to the great mythic cycle of Ragnarok, she is best known simply by her relationships with the major characters, and very little is known about her outside of her relationship to Loki. She is obviously a satyr woman, a Volva, from her magical abilities, and yet that is never explicitly used as a descriptor for her. Early in the myth cycle, when Loki runs off to Jotunheim, meets Angrboda, and has 3 children with her, those children were Fenrir, Jormungandr, and Hel. More on those 3 in the Loki video. Sometime after that, Loki leaves her and returns to the gods with the kids. Odin and the other gods of Asgard were terrified of her children. They were huge, they ate a lot in Fenrir's case. In Hel's case, well, they just were very unsettled by her. But Angrboda's opinion on having her children taken away, Angrboda's feelings as she saw her children be exiled and killed and, well, it's good as killed, bound up for eternity, suffering. We never get her perspective on it in the stories that survive. She simply gives birth to them, and away they go. But when she reappears in the story again, at the very end of things, as a seeress in the land of the dead, whom Odin consults for information on why Balder is dreaming of his death, her reaction to Odin and the end of the Asgardians says it all. Her prediction of Ragnarok in the Voluspa is one of triumph. Balder, Odin's son, would die. Her children, Fenrir the wolf, chained for aeons, Jormungandr the serpent, breaking free from the Midgard seas, and Hel, banished to Niflheim to rule over the dead, will all be free. Free to meet their destiny, free to do whatever they think is best, whatever they want to do, at long, long last. Odin, naturally, condemns her for her joyous prediction of his son's death. But he was the one who sentenced her children to imprisonment. Can we blame her for being happy that he was going to suffer and die at the fangs of her son? Can we blame her? Do you? Jord, goddess of the earth, the ancient earth mother. Jord, Thor's mother. Jord, goddess of earth. Jord is the old word for earth, from which we derive the name for our sacred planet. She is the sister of Day. She is the wife of Odin. That is all clear enough from the lore. There is a quote I want to read for you from Anne Fulton Hope, author of Conversion of the Teutonic Race, who wrote, "The great goddess, mother of earth, universally worshipped through and under various names as Nerthus, Hertha, Berkda, Urse, Holda, Ostara, Caesar, Frigg, Freya, etc. The variety of her names and her worship has given rise to much dispute over the identity of the goddess. She seems to have been worshipped under the double character of the house mother, the patroness of spinning and all domestic duties, or as the mother and source of all fruitfulness. Nor is Miss Hope the only scholar to trace the lineage of the all-mother Frigg through to the goddess Nerthus, described in Tacitus. I just like her quote best, because it meshes well with my own understanding as a devout worshipper of the All-Mother in both her aspects. The aspect of the goddess of spinning, called, depending on the season and what I am doing, Frigg, Frau Hala, Frau Berkta, and also my worship of Frau Erda, Jord, the Earth Mother, who is the planet I walk upon and have worshipped as my goddess for almost 20 years. You see, I truly believe that she is Frigg, and Frigg is her, but Frigg is not all of her. Jord is the all encompassing Earth Mother, known in the Greek pantheon as Gaia, and she is so powerful and so abundant, she can take on countless forms. Frigg and Jord are the same, and they are different. One represents the orderly aspect of her magic, the spinner who weaves the stuff of fate, who oversees the household, who is very much a goddess tied to order. Then there is the other aspect of her magic, the wild magic, the unpredictable beauty of a summer's day, of the deep forest, of the growing mushrooms and the smell of the wet earth on a muddy day when you dig your fingers into the soil and you feel yourself bound to something bigger and more powerful than humans could ever have words for. Order versus chaos. See? Thor, the powerful defender of Midgard, is not born from the orderly aspect of Frigg, as his brother Balder is, but of the wild and untamed earth, giving him strength, cementing with that strength his commitment to the people of Midgard, who are his mother's mortal children. The main threat he protects us from are the more dangerous types of Jotun, one of whom we'll discuss next. Thrym. If you haven't heard the tale of how Thor lost his hammer and had to get it back, I highly recommend you read or listen to it in full. I may even recite my version of it on this channel sometime. I wrote a short play about it a few years back, which was put on at a UU congregation in Fort Lauderdale. The gist of the story goes that Thor woke up one day and his hammer was gone. Thor threatened Loki until Loki agreed to find the hammer. Eventually, Loki came back and said a giant named Thrym had it and would only give it back if Freya married him. Thrym, you see, was one of many Jotun who desired Freya and wanted her for a wife. But Freya is far too sensible a goddess to fall for that kind of nonsense. Thor wanted his hammer back, and he was going to have to do it himself. The end result was Thor dressed up as Freya and went off with Loki to Thrym, pretending to be Freya, to falsely marry him and get his hammer back. We don't know much about Thrym outside of his role in this story, but he must have been a very credulous giant, because despite the mountains of evidence to the contrary, he believed this ruse. He believed Thor was Freya, even after Thor ate an entire ox, drank several barrels of mead, had blazing red eyes, and looked ready to murder everyone, which he did the moment his hammer was returned to him. While this is a very amusing story, quite hilarious, it's important to remember that the layers of meaning folded into the old tales, which were ironed out as best they could under the Christian influence of Snorri. Thrym the giant wanted Freya and got Thor. Thor, in the story, loses his hammer, his symbol of masculine power and fertility. Remember, he's the son of the wild earth. And so Thor, to regain his manhood, had to become a woman, had to put on Freya's dress and veil, and marry a giant. It is presented as a source of Thor's shame and laughter, but I think it also speaks to some deeper fertility mystery buried in the old sources. True fertility, true strength, draws equally from the masculine and feminine sources to find balance, and Thrym acts as an instigator, compelling Thor to undergo this ritual transformation before he can be reunited with his lost Mjolnir. Utgard Loki, also known as Skrimnir, is another Jotun we learn about through Thor's adventures. He is a powerful magician, skilled in casting illusions so convincing he fooled even Loki, another gifted Jotun magician. During Thor's servant Thialfi, and Loki's encounters with him, he turns himself into a giant so large that his glove is mistaken for a hill with caves instead of finger holes. He tricks Thor into smashing 3 deep legs with Mjolnir instead of in his skull. And when the three of them arrive in Utgard and meet up with him in the form now of Utgard Loki uses his magic to challenge the three adventurers to contest as a way of gauging how powerful the Asgardians were compared to himself. Among his illusions, he makes Thialfi race against thought, which he turned into a boy named Hugi. And of course, no matter how fast Thialfi runs, he cannot outrun thought itself. Loki takes on Logi in an eating contest, and while Loki can devour all the food on his side of the table, Logi even devours the table and is declared the winner. Logi is fire incarnate. Thor is more stubborn than his companions and doesn't give up after a single contest. He attempts to drain a drinking horn, and it takes 3 swallows for him to lower it even a little bit. He tries to pick up Utgard Loki's cat and barely gets a single paw off the ground. He wrestles Ellie, Utgard Loki's shriveled old nursemaid, and is dropped to his knees. Only at the end, chilled at how well Thor did in all 3 contests, does Utgard Loki finally admit what had really happened. The drinking horn stretched all the way to the ocean, and Thor drank so much of the ocean that he created the tides. The cat that Thor tried to pick up was the Midgard serpent, and Thor squeezed it so much trying to pull it off the ground that the earth quaked. And finally, Ellie is old age and cannot be defeated. But Thor lasted longer against her than anyone should have been able to. And thus, Utgard Loki sends them on their way and warns them not to come back again. For all his incredible magic and cunning mind, he could only just beat the 3 of them. Skadi. My relationship with Skadi is deep and complicated, and yet, like the proverbial road between 2 close friends, it's never been overgrown for long. I've always loved the way she marches into the stories, strapping on her skis and skiing for Asgard because her father was killed, and she figured the gods owed her a husband, and she heard Balder was beautiful, and she wanted him. And yet, when she was forced to choose her husband with nothing except his feet to choose from, she chose the most beautiful feet she could find, and lo and behold, they were Njord's feet. Jord, the god of the sea, married to Skadi, goddess of winter winds and howling wolves. It was an incompatible marriage, and soon ended, and has always been framed as something incompatible, and yet, despite that, they loved each other. When I climbed up on Palisade Hill along the North Shore last November, with the icy wind howling against my face, and then stood there looking down at the roiling, wild sea of superior far below. I think I got it. Winter and the sea love each other. They bring out the free-flowing, unbroken, unhindered power buried in each of their hearts. And that love is expressed in crashing waves thundering against cliffs, and whitecaps swirling as far as the eye can see, egged on by the cold wind of a winter goddess, letting loose after a short yet sultry summer. In much the same way, I love Skadi. She stings my nose and blows snow at me, but she is also there with me in the unbridled joy of cross-country skiing through the trails of my favorite park, and the sweaty, chilled exultation of a long, playful winter day. Can I handle her 24/7, 365? Probably not, but I don't love her any of the less for that. Gerd, Queen of Spring. Sweet, sweet Gerd, Jotunn of Spring. If you ask me, she is the Icelandic or Norse Ostara, the goddess who wakes when the world turns green and brings warmth in her wake. How could Frey, god of fertility and the golden growing crops, not fall in love the moment he laid his eyes upon her? Like many lovers, he moped until his stepmother, Skadi, got the story out of him, and she persuaded him to do something about it. Frey loved Gerd so much that he gave up his mighty sword to his bondsman if Skirnir could just persuade Gerd to become his bride. After many bribes and threats and cajoling, Gerd agreed to marry Frey in 9 days' time. Frey continues to mope, swearing that he couldn't survive for those 9 days. And then, by most accounts, the two of them live happily ever after. But the loss of his sword will prove fatal to Frey at Ragnarok. We talk about the rune Ingus when we get there. This story is closely tied to the magic and power of the rune Ingus, Frey's sacred rune of the hidden seed. The moping, the waiting, all line up with the magic of something that you deeply desire, but which cannot be gotten all at once. The time is not necessarily immediate. And that is the greatness of Ingus tied to this story. Gerd, the outside force of warmth, spring, who carries with her the necessary conditions for life, is needed in order to awaken the seed of Ingus. Now, do you want more Jotun? Tune in for our next video, Loki and his/her children.